think we're just about ready to go once Councillor Shantz is back in her seat. All right, so getting started, do we have any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have no delegations. We are on to the consent agenda, and I just want to note the late addition of item 4.3, which I think most of us will consider an encouraging development. Does anybody want to move any of the items from the consent agenda up? Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept them? Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Foxton. All in favor? That's approved. We're on to the regular agenda items. We have several reports from Public Health and Emergency Services. The first, item 5.1, working to improve neighborhood safety. And I think Ms. Quigley-Hobbs is going to introduce that report. There is a presentation.
Morning, Councillors. Through you, Madam Chair. Before you today is a report that reviews the findings of the pilot project working to improve neighborhood safety, otherwise known as WINS, a partnership between the City of Cambridge, Sanguine Health Centre, and Public Health. The pilot ran from April 2018 through to March 2019 in downtown Galt. The findings of the evaluations support the continuation and expansion of peer-based needle recovery throughout Waterloo region as a component of a comprehensive harm reduction disposal strategy. Next steps include a proposal for the continuation of the program in the City of Cambridge, but also to include expansion of the program to City of Kitchener and the City of Waterloo in order to cover all 3 urban cores in the region. Excuse me. The proposal will be a budget issue paper for consideration of Council in the 2020 budget process. Today, the partners of the pilot project are here to present the findings of the evaluation. So joining us this morning are Violet Emanetz, the Director of Harm Reduction and Overdose Prevention Services with Sanguine Health Centre, Nathan Lance, Supervisor of Horticultural Services from the City of Cambridge, and Grace Birmingham, Manager of Harm Reduction for Public Health.
Great. So good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chair Clark, and members of Community Services Committee. This morning, as Karen mentioned, we are here with colleagues from the City of Cambridge and from Sanguine Health Centre, Nathan Lance, who's the supervisor of the ambassador team, and Violet Emanetz, who's the manager of outreach for Sanguine Health Centre. And together we'll be sharing some findings from an evaluation completed on the peer-based needle recovery program called Working to Improve Neighbourhood Safety, or WINS. We'd like to start our presentation by sharing a short video that highlights how this program impacted the community and the people who worked as peers.
When I lived on the streets over 10 years ago, it wasn't the drugs that are on the streets right now. In the last 5 years, the crystal meth and the fentanyl and the MDMA and the different kinds of drugs that are around, I see it affect people with mental health issues so much worse.
Driving around town, you can just tell there's a lot of people that are in need of help.
We're seeing everything on such a rise that it seems like we are losing control of it. A lot of people are dying. So many people are dying. Like all the time we're hearing people. I come in here and the peers are like, this person died and this person died and this person is my friend and they died on the weekend, and there's just so much. And that you never really had to worry about.
The difficult part is getting close to people and then them passing away. And having to move on and keep trying to help people.
Before, like a couple years ago, I find that it was worse because the needles were everywhere. But now people appreciate what we're doing and keeping the city clean, keeping the city safe.
The WINS program, I mean, while it's primarily is a needle recovery project, it's so much more than that. The fact that it employs peers, on one hand, what's so great about that is it provides meaningful employment for people who have trouble with traditional employment.
We did find actually a few needles in different areas around our property. The people from the program actually came out and helped to clean it up.
I remember the first time we actually had Charlotte come out to our site, and you could just see how hopeful and happy she was. So our crew kind of adopted her, immediately, and now seeing more people coming through the program and seeing how it helps them, help us, help the community is the good connection we've all made.
It was really nice to have the WINS program this year, to have a group of us out there helping.
Speaking with the business owners, they're just thankful to see the WINS program out and about picking. WINS has the ability to be able to just focus in on the needles and drug debris.
We have to make sure that the streets are going to be, as clean as possible for kids and for anyone walking around.
We knew they were going out there picking up needles, and they certainly are picking up needles, but they are just doing so much more than that, and it's the so much more that's completely, surprised us in such a positive way.
We're getting so much more positive feedback from people. It's more of this community member approached me and said, hey, thank you for doing a great job. Yesterday it was like blizzarding outside and they were out working, and somebody had stopped one of the peers and was like, I cannot believe you're out here doing this. Like, thank you for caring enough to come out in this weather that I don't want to be out in and cleaning up. So there's way, way more positive feedback now.
They have a regular presence in the community, and they become known in the community, and it builds trust. And they're able to then connect those people when they're ready to other services and supports that they may not connect on their own with.
This is helping in the community, helping in my neighborhood, so it helps me in my recovery with giving back.
So supporting appropriate disposal of drug equipment is an important component of harm reduction strategies. Finding ways to reduce improper needle disposal has been a priority for areas across Waterloo region and is also prioritized by other communities in Ontario. Since March 2016, Public Health has worked with community partners through the Harm Reduction Disposal Work Group to improve disposal of harm reduction equipment in Waterloo region. The work group has successfully implemented a number of initiatives, including the installation of 6 outdoor tamper-proof disposal units in Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo, increasing public awareness of safe disposal options, and improving data collection measures to monitor inappropriate disposal. In addition to these activities, a priority of the Harm Reduction Disposal Work Group has been to enhance outreach services as a means to increase disposal education and provide mobile disposal services. In April of last year, one-time funding allowed a partnership of Public Health, Sanguine Health Centre, and the City of Cambridge to explore the role of outreach in supporting proactive needle recovery. A pilot for an outreach program called WINS was developed and implemented in downtown Galt between April 2018 and March 2019. The goals of the WINS pilot were to reduce the number of discarded needles in the community, provide peer-to-peer education for people who use substances of proper disposal options, and provide containers and other information, to increase meaningful employment opportunities for people with barriers to traditional employment, and to create a positive community response related to harm reduction. Public Health led an evaluation to measure the success of the pilot in achieving these goals and to document the role of outreach in a comprehensive disposal strategy. I'll now welcome Violet and Nathan to help describe the results of the pilot and the impacts it has had on the peers, the community, and the agencies involved.
Good morning. So men and women who have lived experience with injection drug use are often not ready for traditional employment within the competitive market. And we recruited a number of people who have that lived experience to work as peer workers within the WINS program. This included individuals who identify as current active substance users, as well as people who are in recovery for any length of time from their substance use. Over the course of the pilot year, a total of 14 peer workers were hired and trained into the program, and throughout the final 5 months of the pilot year, from November 2018 to March 2019, a consistent group of 5 peer workers regularly participated in the program every week. Peer workers recorded the information about the materials that they retrieved from the public areas, including sidewalks, parks, trails, alleyways, and the number of interactions that they had with people from the general public as well as service users. In total, 3,400 needles and 226 crack pipes were found and safely disposed. Those are items that were improperly disposed within the community. Peers also engaged in a total of 762 interactions with members of the public. This included people who use substances, offering those individuals support, encouragement, supplies, providing education on proper disposal, and collecting needles from them directly, as well as members of the general public who had questions about what's happening in the community, about improper disposal, about substance use, and about a number of other topics, including the work that the peers were doing in the community. What the numbers don't tell us is how this impacted on the peers who worked within the program and the people that they connected with. While the program did absolutely achieve its goal, reducing needle litter, the evaluation further revealed that a significant strength of the program was that it offers an opportunity for peers to engage in meaningful work, to connect with marginalized community members, including those who may not access any other harm reduction supports at all. All of the peers reported significant gains in their self-esteem, their self-worth, and their sense of community and belonging as a result of their involvement in the program. They all felt very strongly that the work that they are doing is important work, and they're thankful for the opportunity to give back to their community. Many of them have also shared that their involvement in the program brings meaning to their lives. Many of the peers reported that this gave them a reason to get out of bed in the morning, to leave their home, to go out in the community, and to become a part of the community again. 2 of the peers, since participating in the program, have moved on to traditional employment. And this is a significant part of what we were hoping to see with this program. The peers often have incredible skills that have been pushed off to the side as a result of their substance use or their marginalization. And an important part in bringing people back into our community is giving them those opportunities to redevelop their self-esteem, their sense of connection, and their sense of belonging. Since the pilot began, we have also seen a significant influx in the number of people who use substances who have reached out to express interest in being part of the program. We've also received requests for the program to be made available in other parts of the region, including Kitchener and Waterloo and other parts of Cambridge. Another side effect is that we're seeing a number of people that we have never met before who are engaging with other programs within the community. For example, the Sanguine Community Health Van, who are saying that they were directly referred by a WINS peer worker.
Good morning. At the time the pilot was implemented, the City of Cambridge was also beginning to implement a number of sharps retrieval strategies, including the creation of our ambassador program. Our city ambassadors undertake regular patrols in the core areas to monitor areas with high maintenance needs and provide a friendly and welcoming presence in each core area through the removal of graffiti, removal of weeds, clearing of sidewalks, flower bed maintenance, and litter removal, which includes needle litter. It was because of this proactive approach that it was felt that a peer outreach model could complement this work, and so Galt was chosen as a pilot site. We worked with Sanguine throughout the pilot to coordinate the tracking of recovered needles and maintain communication to ensure coordination between the WINS pilot project and our ambassador team. From our perspective, the WINS program has been a positive addition to the downtown Galt community as a complement to our work as a part of the ambassador program. Support for the WINS program within the community has grown, and the responses have all been positive. It has been helpful to have the WINS program to give us an example of our ongoing response to community concerns regarding substance use and needle litter.
The goal of the pilot was to measure the impact that peer-based SHARPS outreach program could have on a comprehensive disposal strategy and the conditions under which that would be successful. So on indicators related to locating and properly disposing of needles, the pilot was successful. Needles were removed from city trails, alleys, and parks, contributing to an overall safer community. The people employed through this program are critical to this outcome as they themselves were knowledgeable about their own neighborhoods and where issues of improper needle disposal were found most often. By the same token, other outcomes associated with the program related to peer development and community engagement were equally positive and illustrated success of the program. Finally, the evaluation identified a number of opportunities for growth, including program expansion, as Violet had mentioned, finding a host location that allows for more on-site involvement from the coordinator, and data monitoring to support consistent data tracking. So on behalf of Violet, Nathan, and myself, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Grace. There is a question at least, if I can get you to, oh, there's several popping up. First, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I love the model, and I really like what you're doing. It's a win-win-win. We get cleanup, we get outreach to the community, and we get people who can become contributing members of the community again. So a wonderful program. I'm wondering, what are your challenges as you move ahead to expand the program?
I think one of the main challenges that we face is funding, related to funding, and so in order to get sustainable funding for this program over the long term, it would require some investment.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Thanks for a great report and a very successful pilot. When some of us went down to South Riverdale to look at their medical clinic to deal with people who were injection drug users, one of the things that they talked about was the outreach, and if somebody from the BIA said there's somebody either in my bathroom using drugs or there's needles, that the people would go out. And I'm wondering if this pilot had that ability for people to call in, and if it did, number one, and number two, great community information session last night about the health clinic that's going in at 150 Duke. And just wondering, as you look forward to expanding this pilot both to Kitchener and Waterloo, Kitchener will be the only one that has the wraparound services when it gets launched in the new year. And will those dynamics look slightly different in Kitchener perhaps than in Waterloo and Cambridge?
So for the pilot project, the main goal was to reduce improper needle disposal. As you know, as we discovered through the pilot, people who were involved in this, they felt that their role was much more than that, and they were valuable players in reaching out to people who were perhaps quite marginalized, isolated often, and encouraging them to access services. So when we talk about program expansion as one of the pieces that we learned through this, and one of the areas that we'd like to see grow, it certainly would be in that area to see how peers can also play a role in that type of outreach to the community to support people who might be struggling. That could include a component of businesses being able to call a number.
Thank you.
Councillor Jowett.
Thank you, through the chair. So just a couple of quick questions. I've met Charlotte on several occasions, and I see her as being a very committed and compassionate sort of researcher, outreach person in the WINS program. I actually think she takes it very responsible, her role, and I'm sure she's indicative of many people that are cooperating in the WINS program. I just want to get my head around, we tend to look for some folks with lived experience for some great reasons to sort of get them reintegrated into our community and support some purposeful, meaningful work to help them along as well. My concern is for the relapse rate, and I know that is happening. I've actually witnessed that happening. So now I'm looking to our staff and our support services to see what are we doing to mitigate the relapse for our WINS folks that are trying to be helpful, because we are literally putting them back in a very vulnerable environment, right? So what are we doing there?
So there's a few things that we're doing on that. Prior to bringing any of the peers into work, we are very clear with them about what this position will entail. We have very frank and very open conversations about substance use, about recovery, about where they are in the process of recovery, whether they are in recovery or not. Once any peer worker is involved with saying, when they have access to our social support team, which includes our social workers, they have regular debriefing with the WINS supervisor as well on an ongoing basis. And then we have the ability to refer them to any other services that they feel would be beneficial. We have seen people move in and out of their substance use, which we see in general out in the community. We know that recovery is not a linear process for most people. Often what we find helps people when they do relapse or when they do start using again is to maintain those connections within the community that we're seeing them create and feel better about as a result of participating in the WINS project. So it's kind of a double side to really have frank, open conversations about those potential risks. Are you comfortable being out in the community? Are you comfortable being around substance use? Are you comfortable being around harm reduction materials, such as syringes or other things that you may be finding? But also, let's build this relationship and make sure that if there are any concerns, that you have a place that you can go to and you can have a conversation and we can provide some support as well.
So while you're there, Violet, so how often did you find that was happening with the team, the WINS team then?
I would say it bounces back and forth again. So a number of the peers that we brought on were very open about the fact that their substance use is quite fluid. So they would say, I'm not going to use during my shifts, but I'm going to cut down my use and use as I normally would, maybe in the evenings or on the weekends. We had other peers who are completely in recovery and have had no issues, with any relapse or even any urge to use. So again, it's really fluid there to say, for most of the peers, I would say it's been a very positive part, again, to have that connection, because we know that when people are really isolated, it is much harder for them to access those services. And part of the WINS model and part of peer work in general is being very open about the fact that we know you have this history, and you've been very upfront about your challenges and the struggles and the successes. So we can support that differently than we would for maybe a traditional employee where we're not quite sure what you should do around substance use in a lot of cases. With the peers, it's already out on the table right up front, so we can watch, we can have conversations and keep people safe.
Okay, and then just one more question on this, in this particular area. So let's say, because we do know that if someone starts to use, then perhaps they then become a dealer. So how are we ensuring that it doesn't move into that more critical concern of actually becoming a dealer that is right there, perpetuating further difficulty?
I'm not sure that I can answer that specifically because we have not had any I don't have any experience specifically with our peer workers becoming dealers while they're working for us.
Okay.
So I can't speak to what people do when they leave the program or if they leave peer work in general. But again, part of the reason people become drug dealers is because of the financial side of things. So when we're able to offer people meaningful employment that does provide them with some amount of financial incentive, we know that that's a helpful piece to keeping people a little bit safer in the community in general. But I can't say specifically that we've had any issues with someone using their position to deal drugs.
So that's, I'm glad you said that, because now it's perpetuated another question. So I've heard someone say that it's a $400 a day habit. Is that an average understanding of it, or?
It would depend on the substance and the person and how long they've been using and their tolerance and, all of, what the market value is of certain substances. I would say it's certainly not uncommon for someone to have a significant substance use cost, I guess I would call that. But I wouldn't say $400 a day would be common at all.
That seems high?
That's very high.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. And then, of course, when we have the WINS team out, they're doing, what, 2 or 3 days a week, or?
They're doing 3 days a week right now.
3 days a week? Okay, and what are we paying them hourly, Violet?
Excuse me. They are $15 an hour by honorarium.
Okay, so that's not bad. Okay, and then I'll suspend my questions because I have some financial questions for later, but thank you so much, Violet, I appreciate it.
Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I have a simple question. Have you made this presentation to Cambridge City Council yet? And if not, when?
At this point, we have not presented to Cambridge City Council.
So when will that be then?
We would count on our partners to help us find a date. So we've been working with a number of staff members from the City of Cambridge, and we would look forward to providing a presentation there.
Thank you.
Councillor Harris.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, and obviously very important work happening in our community. 3,400 needles, that's a lot. I don't know if the average person here in the region would realize that that's the amount of needles that are being picked up. This may be a difficult question for staff to answer, but on an annual basis, how many needles would we give out or would be distributed perhaps in the region as an entirety, or perhaps just in Cambridge? Speaking to this issue, I'm just kind of curious on how many we actually think we collect. And I know that obviously we're expecting a lot of them to be disposed of in a proper manner in the boxes and different facilities, but do you have an idea roughly of that number?
Through you, Madam Chair. We did put a report forward to Community Services Committee, and I believe it was the beginning of the year. I would have to look up the numbers to be sure. However, you did ask about what we would call a return rate. And I believe this year, or last year rather, it was at around the 73% mark, if I recall correctly. But in terms of actual numbers of how many given out and how many received back, I don't have those exact numbers offhand. But can certainly get that for you.
Sure. Yeah. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. Just quickly, I think we had those numbers last year, and I think I was shocked by the amount. Was it not 400,000 that we gave out, and that less than 200,000 came back? And if you said we're at 73%, that's a great increase. 17%. Oh, 17% came back, did you say? Yeah, so it was, yeah. But I think it was in the ballpark of 400,000. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what you said last year.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we did see a significant increase in returns in 2018, and we certainly hope to see those returns continue to increase through both our kiosks. That has made a significant difference in our community with respect to disposal, and through innovative programs like this one.
I see no other questions at this time. Councillor Joe, did you have another?
Just a quick financial question, because I know the WINS program was a one-time deal. Does anybody remember what that one-time investment was? And then, what does it look like as we make the request financially to go to 3 urban centers and ongoing from a fiscal perspective? Do we have that, or am I a bit premature on this?
Through you, Madam Chair, we would provide more detailed numbers in the budget issue paper that we'll be putting forward. It is a comprehensive strategy, and I believe that the approximate number that we're looking at is somewhere in the vicinity of $275,000 to $300,000 on an annual basis.
So, thanks, Karen. Can you tell me what the first pilot project cost in Galt then, just to kind of get an answer to the progression of?
I'll let Grace answer that one.
The pilot, for the pilot project, it was $90,000.
Was $9,000? Thanks, Grace.
90,000.
Oh, I was going to say, well, we've certainly expanded our needs there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bye.
I think that's it. I look forward to the budget paper. I can tell you personally that I've had in the last 3 days 2 conversations with one with a city councillor and one with a property owner, really looking for this sort of support in Kitchener as well. Okay, before we move on to 5.2, I believe Councillor Harris has a conflict of interest relating to one of the items on the consent agenda. And I will turn you on. Oops, and then I will quickly turn you off again.
I did want to back up and declare that. What was a number I gave you?
Oh, it was
2E.
Yeah.
4.2.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. Item 5.2, back on the regular agenda, Vaccine Preventable Diseases Program Report. That's an information item, but Ms. Quigley-Hobbs would like to speak to it.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. Before you is a review report from the Vaccine Preventable Disease Program with a focus on the years from 2015 to 2018. The report reviews the program activities that with the goal of preventing the acquisition and transmission of vaccine preventable diseases in the region. The report focuses on the buckets of work required under the OPHS standards and protocols, including the program activities and outcomes from 2015 to 18. Some highlights include a summary of the work to implement and maintain a new provincial database called Panorama that houses the immunization information for school-aged children. A module of this program provides support to the inventory and distribution of vaccines to healthcare partners in the region. The summary of the partnerships, strategies, and activities used to enforce the Immunization of School Pupils Act, clinic services both in the schools across the region and the 2 public health offices, surveillance results for adverse events following immunization, and collection and maintenance of immunization information for children in licensed daycares. The report also includes next steps to bring the program in full alignment with the Ontario Public Health Standards. Activities include work to develop a plan to include analysis of immunization records for licensed daycare children, onboarding of the French language schools to the Immunization of School Pupils Act enforcement activities in 2020, and full inclusion of private schools in 2021. The program also plans to enhance health promotion activities to promote the safety and benefit of vaccines and increase confidence in immunization, not only for school compliance, but more broadly in the community to prevent infection and disease. In addition, I would like to draw your attention to a portion of the report that includes 2 items of note from 2019. Recently, in response to a media outlet request, the department produced an updated local immunization coverage rate for 2018-19 school year. This same media request went to many other health units across the province. In Waterloo region, coverage rates remain high and slightly above the provincial average. Exemption rates are slightly higher than the provincial average, and we believe this is a reflection of public health practice to fully enforce the Immunization of School Pupils Act annually at every grade level. And that's not the case in every health unit. A percentage of health units, though, this year will be working to move from a 2-cohort approach to full implementation over the next few years. The report contains limited information about the annual flu program. This will be a separate report that will be on the community services agenda for the next meeting. I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce David Aoki, our Vaccine Preventable Disease Program Manager. And if there are any questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Thank you.
We do have one question. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair. So we watch the records of the students, and we send notices out. And at some point, if the student doesn't get the vaccine, they are to step out of school. Are they ever allowed back without the vaccine? Besides a medical condition that they don't have to have it?
So you're asking about medical exemption?
No, I know there's medical exceptions, but if a family is stringent on not doing it, would they be allowed back at school?
Okay, there is a ability in the Immunization of School Pupils Act to have a philosophical exemption. That process has been enhanced in the last update to the legislation, which requires parents to come into the health unit and receive an education program with a public health nurse. And then at that point, they are required to have an affidavit signed by a justice of the peace or a notary. And then that information then is put into our database, and there is an exemption on file. So the significance of that is if we were to see an outbreak of a specific disease in a school, we would have a full understanding of who is actually immunized, who is at risk, perhaps because they have a medical condition, and then who is a philosophical exemption.
One other bizarre question. I have a child that gets the German measles shot. It doesn't take. She's had it about 6 times. It does not take. Would she be susceptible to German measles then?
Gee, I don't know. That's yours, David.
Through you, Madam Chair, there is a small portion of the population that don't respond to vaccines. Some vaccines, it's not all vaccines, so German measles being the example. That would be a discussion you'd have to have, should we have a measles outbreak locally with your family physician. Under the Act, because that person has had the required number of doses, they would actually not appear as being not covered in our database. But certainly, it would be something that you would want to look at. And that's a good reason why we want to keep our rates as high as possible. Because the people who, of no fault of their own, who are susceptible to disease, they need to be protected by the community. And keeping those vaccine rates high creates that kind of bubble of protection around those who, for whatever reason, cannot get the vaccine medically or just don't respond to the vaccine.
Thank you.
I see no other questions. Thank you very much. We're on to our community services report. Item 5.3 is simply an information, but staff are here if there are any questions regarding the master plan. Okay. Councillor Strickland.
Madam Chair, you're referring to 5.3, the housing master plan?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. I've just got a couple of questions. And so, just so I'm clear, so this report is dealing specifically with our, for the Waterloo region housing stock, right?
That's correct.
So when I'm looking at the financial costing tool, 15 shortlisted sites based on building concepts as presided by the planning consultants. So can you give me an estimate of what kind of capital expenditure we're looking at?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So through Madam Chair, based on the recommended scenario and group of projects, that has come out of the master plan review. The total capital investment over the 10 years is in the $200 to $230 million range.
Okay, so I had an idea it would be significant, and I'm just wondering, because it's about our housing stock, how does this relate and how is it integrated with our rent supplement program? Because one of the things that came up through the financial accountability review last time around, and will be subject to review with the current consultants, is do we build housing? Do we continue to make this kind of investment, or we supplement people who need housing and let the private market respond?
Through you, Madam Chair, you're quite right. That was one of the questions that was asked of the steering committee, and the steering committee has a recommendation that will come forward in the next report, not to kill the ending of the report, but the recommendation by the subcommittee or the steering committee is that the region of Waterloo, or that the Waterloo region housing continue to develop insofar as there is the ability to intensify on existing properties. There would be no new land acquisition or no new building outside of that. So on the properties where we have the ability to intensify and increase the stock, that's where we would do it. Now, that's subject to council approval in the report that will come at the end of the month.
Okay, so there's nothing to prevent us from, well, first of all, thanks for that, Douglas. So when you're talking about the 15 shortlisted sites, those are on our existing properties, correct?
Yes, all of the sites that we reviewed, that the steering committee and that the advisory committee reviewed, are solely Waterloo Regional Housing sites, the 65 that we control.
Right, okay. So there's nothing to prevent us from having that intensification and that housing stock be partnered with the private sector, and there could be rent supplement units.
In fact, that would be part of the plan, would be that we would do intensification on our own properties, and that the provincial funding that is the Canada-Ontario provincial funding would be generally used in the private market to continue with RFPs to build in the private market, or the not-for-profit and co-op market. And rent supplements would continue to be used as well.
Okay, so I just need to have a better understanding how those connections are made between rent supplements and a projected investment of $230 million by the region, and how that recommendation coming forward in a couple of weeks is linked to our consultants' review. So we may want to delay one or the other until we see what the consultants' review comes up with. I think the point is that we need to make this investment. We need to have more affordable housing stock. 100% agreed with that. And we likely need to be a little bit more ambitious than 600 new units. Well, I'm just trying to figure out a way how we can get more units to the market more quickly and more economically. Yeah, thanks.
Mr. Bartholomew Sanders, we saw a report recently, unless I'm imagining it, that spoke specifically about rent supplements and some of the parameters and limitations of that program. If that rings a bell, can you speak to that? Or can Jennifer Murdoch speak to that?
My apologies, Madam Chair. I have to refer to the manager of the program.
Not to anticipate what I'm sure Jennifer will say, because she'll say a lot more than this, but I think one of the problems is with rent subs is you need to have rental housing out there to accept the supplements, and we do have a shortage in our community of rental housing.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The rent supplement program is one of our tools in affordability. It's a provincially, federally funded program. So it's very mobile, it's very flexible. It's something that we can use in any one of our portfolios as long as it reaches the maximum income limits and the maximum rent limits that we set out for the program. So it's, again, something that could be used in any one of our buildings. The biggest barrier right now would be getting landlord recruitment.
And my understanding, speaking to some other housing providers in our community, that's not a problem that we're alone in experiencing. spoken to other agencies that use rent subs, and they're finding the same thing. There's just not.
It's a region-wide and a province, yeah, exactly. It's a region-wide, province-wide issue regarding recruitment of landlords who want to be part of the program.
Yeah.
The rents are a little bit lower than what they're able to get in the private market.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
If I may, I think just to put a fine point on it, it's the lack of availability of affordable units. So there are units in the community, but their price point is beyond what our supplements will allow us to place clients in. So the issue is the affordable units as opposed to general availability.
There's a few other questions, so maybe you can get comfortable. Councillor Jowett.
Thank you, through the chair. Douglas, I think you maybe have answered this, but I just hoping to get a little bit more clarity. So if I take page 49 and I look at Grand Avenue, Cambridge, and I say $166,000 of operating costs divided by 86 units brings us to approximately $1,930.23. Well, not approximately. And then I take a look at the Amos Avenue, Waterloo, and I take the operating cost of $206,000 divided by 40 units. I get $5,150. So what I'm trying to understand is, even though you state that the operating cost per bedroom is $2,000 on both, what am I missing?
I apologize. Through you, Madam Chair, I refer to the manager of Waterloo Regional Housing, Mina Fayez-Bagat.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The averaging of the cost per unit depends on the age of the unit, the size of the unit, and the capital outlook of needs for that unit. So when you combine all those factors, you'll see fluctuations depending on the age of the build itself, what are the future planned out capital needs for that building. Additionally, also size, 168 Grand Avenue is one of our larger sites. It's 86 units on a 2-story large plane, and it's one of our older sites, I think built in 1970 or 1971. So that age pocket requires a lot more work, and it's a lot more units versus a smaller build, like a 40-unit build for the other example in there, might also be requiring much less capital costs. And then again, apartments versus townhomes also changes that projection.
Okay, and so just for further clarification, I'm only looking at operating costs because I recognize that construction and leasehold improvements are a separate number, and that's why you have it listed outside of operating cost. I'm trying to use simple math on operating cost here, and that's where I'm feeling a little bit challenged around it. So I think maybe there's a simple understanding, and these are all based on the assumptions of 1 bedrooms, and I understand that they will fluctuate as well. So what is the intent of the actual number, $2,000 cost per bedroom?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could try to clarify, hopefully this clarifies and not confuses. So the sheets list both the number of units, and then if you drill in and do the math, you can figure out number of bedrooms. And the metric they've reported on is operating costs per bedroom, not operating costs per unit.
Okay.
Because different units are of different sizes. And I think that's why we tried to use the metric operating cost per bedroom to try to standardize and actually give a really good sense of, relatively speaking, are some properties more expensive to operate than others on a per bedroom basis? Because if you've got 10 units and they're all 4-bedroom units, they're bigger and the operating costs per unit are going to be higher, but the operating cost per bedroom could be the same. And that's actually what you're seeing in these 2 properties, is the operating cost per bedroom is each about $2,000.
So Mike, what you're saying is if I look at the Amos Avenue property, what I'm seeing is a lot more 2-bedroom units than on the Grand Avenue. Is that an assumption I can make then?
Yeah.
Right, 2 or 3, right? So multiple bedrooms?
So it lists it, so Amos Avenue, 9 2-bedroom units, 22 3-bedroom units, 7 4-bedroom units, and 2 5-bedroom units. So Amos Avenue has a lot of bedrooms.
Yeah.
Relative to Grand Avenue, which has 85 one-bedroom units.
Okay, much appreciated, thank you.
Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to pursue a little bit further. I was a little unclear on the question, the answer to Councillor Strickland's question, because I thought maybe he was asking whether or not on the 15 region projects that have been identified for intensification, we could engage in a third-party arrangement to intensify our own properties. I took from your answer, Douglas, that you were suggesting that the private sector would be involved in properties other than the 15 that we've identified.
Through you, Madam Chair, generally speaking, that is the answer. You're correct. Although there is the opportunity to look at, in some cases, I get it wrong every time, public-private partnerships where condos could be considered, but that's not going to be part of, again, I don't want to kill the end of the next report, but that's not going to be part of what's recommended by the steering committee.
Back to something that you did mention in your last comments. One of the things that the Master Plan Steering Committee looked at was the proportion of affordable housing in the community that we're currently providing, which is about 30% of the total. And the committee felt that there was a value in maintaining that level of our own involvement and commitment. So I think that's not to say that we aren't going to see similar increases to other not-for-profit and for-profit developers, but that was sort of an underlying principle going into the work of the steering committee. Sorry, Tom.
So the door is open. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just more curious whether or not on our own sites we have that option when the time comes that we have to make a decision. So you're suggesting, Madam Chair, that the master plan does not contemplate that?
No, because, and I'm speaking just as a member of the committee at this point, I think that what we felt was that our role as a service provider in terms of a funder of new developments would allow us to support the other, the not-for-profit and the for-profit housing sector, and we would be able to facilitate developments without using our own properties in that way.
Okay. The other question I had is, so what does the master plan suggest in terms of if we have vacant land ourselves? So I'm thinking particularly of the bus terminal on Charles Street. Does it give us any direction in terms of what our options are in that regard if council were to decide that there should be a housing component to the redevelopment of that property?
Mr. Murray?
Yep, so if I could, so what you'll see when the master plan, one region housing master plan report comes forward next committee cycle is it's just looking at Waterloo region housing properties. It doesn't speak to any other region owned properties. So I think those are some things that, the other thing I'll say is we've got a report coming forward, I think the next committee cycle, with kind of a proposed process to look at a whole range of options relative to the Charles Street site and embarking on a process, sort of regional staff evaluation, stakeholder input on, what are the pros and cons of different uses of that site. So that'll be specific to the Charles Street site, but also in terms of housing and affordable housing, I know Douglas and Ryan are looking at, further work, and part of that further work could be looking at, does the region own property that we could make available for affordable housing construction, whether it's Charles Street or other properties, and work with the private sector or the not-for-profit sector where the region's contribution isn't cash, the region's contribution is potentially land that we own, or the proceeds from sale of land that we own and plowing that back into affordable housing if that, is more cost effective. So I think there's a whole range of things that we can look at over the next little while.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks.
Even as a committee, we talked a lot about separating and being clear about what were we meeting about. Were we meeting as a housing provider, or were we meeting as a service manager? And we had to remind ourselves several times during each meeting, oops, we're crossing the lines here. So it's two different reports, I think. Councillor Shant.
Thank you. I like the discussion around public-private partnerships, and I'm a big proponent of that. With rental costs going up, I wondered if we've ever looked at sharing the subsidy costs with not-for-profits or churches or some of the community groups that also try to provide social services.
Well, I can say we do that, given my own experience, but did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's work that we do on a regular basis through formal agreements with not-for-profit and co-op housing providers specifically, also with the providers out in the private market as well. There are some programs that provide restrictions on stacking dollars, but we do what we can to make the programs work through a various number of agreements.
I would assume it's becoming more challenging as rental rates increase.
With using our affordable housing capital funding, we are able to get at housing that's somewhere between 60% and 80% of market, but that's not rent geared to income. So that doesn't help people who are on OW or something like that. So we can, in some cases, apply the rent supplements to bring that affordable housing down to rent geared to income. And I know that's something we do. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really like the way the conversation's heading, and I thank Councillor Galloway for putting a finer point on what I said earlier. It's precisely what I was looking for is the potential to partner with a third party on those 15 sites to develop it. And then when Douglas mentioned public-private partnerships, we have to be creative. And if we're looking at developing these over 10 years, one thing that we could consider is that you could bundle them. At $230 million, it could be a public-private partnership. You could bundle them, put it out to tender, and look at a whole different process to get them built in 3 years rather than 10. But that would require a public-private partnership. It would be different than site per site over a period of 10 years. So I think that's something we should consider. I know that there are other municipalities across Canada who are having similar discussions about public-private partnerships to help with various infrastructure needs, including housing.
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, we have talked at some length about pulling together a steering committee or a task group, as it were, to look at non-traditional ways of funding and creating additional housing, specifically to deal with the partners who are typically not at the table. So it's getting at exactly what you're talking about, Councillor Strickland. We're not there yet, but we're planning to bring together a task group to look at just that.
I'm not sure if that's in the report, but I think it would be wise to include it in the report. Yeah, thanks.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Just hearkening back to my Habitat for Humanity days, I want to underscore how important the relationship is. If municipalities can look at a land inventory and provide that land to other players, it's an incredible leg up. Finding land that's affordable and throughout the region, and we know that the need is region-wide, is absolutely pivotal. So I think that would probably be one of the most effective things we could do to engage not-for-profit and even private sector partners into building, because it's that land piece that's so difficult. And so many pieces of our land actually actually are within the infrastructure that already exists. So people who need subsidized housing and affordable housing can walk to a bus and can get those amenities that they need because they may not have cars. So I think that's a wonderful direction. And that is something that has been pursued right across Canada by municipalities.
Councillor Erb.
I like the idea of the inventory of regionally owned lands. Historically, I'd be interested to know how we worked with area municipalities to determine if land would be available from them. Excuse me. Does that get worked into the mix? There was a media report in the last 2 or 3 weeks where the city of Kitchener had identified many spaces in the core where they were underutilized and could be used for affordable housing or other community projects. So I'm wondering what kind of a relationship we have with other area municipalities to increase the inventory of our land.
We're trying to decide which staff gets that one. Oh, here comes Jeff. Jeff Schumacher.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We have been meeting regularly with our counterparts at the area municipalities of planning staff on one issue in particular, which is inclusionary zoning. But discussions have gone on to the cities are starting to think about how they can get more involved in housing, affordable housing. So we are having those discussions. In an upcoming report, we are bringing our 5-year update to our 10-year housing and homelessness plan. And actually one of the action items is to look at a housing first approach, which is whenever land is available, municipal land is available, you look at it through the lens of making it available for affordable housing first. We have one example from, I believe, back in 2008, where we partnered with the city of Cambridge. They had a piece of surplus land that they got through a plan of subdivision process on Lena Ave in Cambridge, and the region partnered with the city on a joint RFP, and they made that land available for affordable housing. So we are in discussions with the cities and working on this together.
Okay, thank you. I see no other questions, and we look forward to a follow-up report. And I think all the questions for the follow-up report have probably been asked and answered. But it'll be good to be reminded. Oh, sorry, we do have one question. Councillor Jowett.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask if we could get a recap of the wait list when we get the next report as well. I've got some basic ideas of what it was, about 2014 and how much it grew 2018, but can we kind of get some of that as well? So that it helps us with the sense of urgency? Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you. We're on to information and correspondence. Are there any council inquiries or requests for information? Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. I'd just like to, excuse me, have my comment removed. I've been working with the staff at the region here to have the artifacts returned to North Dumfries, and we're working on a process right now, so I no longer require the report. Should it fall through, I'll ask for it later, but at this time, we don't require it.
All right.
Thank you.
So that comes off the list. Thank you. We do have one other business item, and I believe Ms. Quigley-Hobbs will speak to that.
Through you, Madam Chair. Good morning again, councillors. A update on the interim consumption and treatment service site for you. Construction at the interim site on the second floor of 150 Duke Street is wrapping up, and all furniture and supplies needed for service delivery are on site. This includes security features that include a combination of remote monitoring of cameras on the site by Regional Security and Response Unit, as well as on-site security personnel during the hours of operation. Beginning this week, staff from Public Health and Sanguine have been on the site to set up the service. Health Canada staff will visit the site tomorrow, Wednesday, to ensure the site setup aligns with the requirements of the exemption. Sanguine has hired interim site staff, and the staff mix includes registered nurses, social workers, and peer workers. Training has commenced this week and continues into next week. I'm very pleased to say the interim site at 150 Duke Street in Kitchener will open on Tuesday, October 15th. Operating hours will be 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And as you are aware, community engagement activities are underway, including information sessions and community open houses this week. A more fulsome update will be provided for Council in the form of a CSC report at the October 22nd meeting. And thank you very much for your continued interest and support. Greatly appreciated.
And thank you to staff and for all your efforts during all of these community information centers. I was saying earlier that to Ms. Schlorf that I got the first invitation and I responded, and then I got another one. They're like constant. So anyway, good work. All right, our next meeting is the 22nd, and do I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Sean, seconded by Chair Redmond. All in favor? On to Admin and Finance.